Hey everybody, my name is Joey Muñoz. I'm a former pro wrestler named the Rock Superstar Kaos. I currently run a wrestling school out in Bell Gardens, California called Santino Bros Wrestling. And what we do there is we're training kids that have a dream of becoming a professional wrestler. Some of them want to just actually hit the ring, take some bumps. Some of them want to be world champions. Some of them want to be Hall of Famers. And so we started in the backyard of how to, train these kids. And what we want to do is really just train them how to be the best professional wrestlers out there. But going down the line, what we're looking at and what we're seeing is, these wrestlers want to go to the next level. They want to go to the national level. They want to go to WWE or AEW. And so how do you get there? And I'd like to tell a lot of people is you have to start thinking about your character, your personality in professional wrestling. The moves that we do as wrestlers, we do them because we love those moves. We love doing the superplexes and the body slams, but really the facial expressions, what we do is selling. We tell stories in the middle of that ring. We tell them right when we come to that curtain. It's you got your face, the good guy, and you got your heel, the bad guy. And you kind of do that with the once again, facial expressions, the gear, the colors that they're wearing. When they go out there, you want your baby face to shine, and they're going to do all the cool moves to really get the crowd up to their feet. And then that's the point where the heel has to then go in there and shut it all down and quiet everybody down. So once you do that, you start giving your opponent heat, and you could just beat somebody up. But it really doesn't mean anything. You have to connect to the crowd. My mentor, Dynamite D, used to tell me, hey, you have to make the people laugh, make the people cry, and really touch their heart. And I was like 22 years old, and I said, Dynamite D, what the hell are you talking about? I want to kick ass in professional wrestling, And he says, that's cool, but you do that for you. But if you want to drive people into the arenas, so no great wrestling match in the history of professional wrestling has ever sold out an arena. It's the personality, the character, the promos that come before the wrestling match that does that. And so I asked him, how do you do that? And he's like, your facial expressions, if you can have emotion and show empathy and get sympathy from that crowd, they can start relating to you. In that story, in the middle of that match, you might not have a promo time, you might not have a character, you might have 5 minutes in the middle of that ring to tell your story. And how do you do that? You do that with your facial expressions of somebody getting beat up. And the heel be very nasty. And the heel's got to do their job to really get that heat, get the crowd to be mad at them. And if you can do that, if those wrestlers are doing their job at the end of the day, when their face is mounting a comeback and really it's about to take it home and go to the finish, when the face does that, the crowd is at the edge of their feet. And that's the anticipation of what's coming next. And that's what we do in professional wrestling. And that's what I've learned. I've been very successful as a trainer and coach at Santino Brothers. I tried my wrestling for 15 years and did a lot of cool stuff, wrestled in a lot of different countries, but my real success comes in the wrestling school and teaching these kids. And then beyond that is you're not just teaching these kids wrestling, you're actually teaching them to be a young adult. And that's what I've learned when I've had these parents come up to me and hug me and kiss me and say, hey, my child was insubordinate and they went to your wrestling school and now they have a direction in their life, And so that's what I do right there in East LA, California.
You were talking about people's facial expressions, which of course is a great idea. Now, what would you do if someone was a luchador and they were wearing a full face mask? How do they engage with the audience and tell that story when they're handicapped in that regards?
Even if you are wearing the mask, you're still encouraged to do the facial expressions, whether people can see it or not. But then it just goes down to more body language of what you're doing, and then that's just like a completely new, different art in professional wrestling, obviously, because you are taking that face away. But with the luchador, I think even sometimes when we have the new wrestlers going out there and wrestling, they're really nervous. They put in about a year of training or so and they get yelled at by the coaches and they get really nervous when they go out there and wrestle. And we don't want them to really kind of like, not have a great performance, So what I try to do is I put them under a mask. We put them under a hood. And when you do that, it kind of just lets them be freer. 100% more free, because in professional wrestling, you can't be afraid to make a fool out of yourself. You're actually getting in there, you're sitting in the corner and you're pretending you're getting beat up, and that's part of the game. You have to make it look real. If you have to believe it, because if you don't believe it, why would anybody else believe what you're doing? You really have to believe it. So if and I would tell these guys, when you're a heel and you're going in there, like, hey, this is your night. The idea behind it, backstage, we're talking about it. Hey, the face has to shine right here. But as a heel, when they're shining, you have to really believe that you're getting mad. You have to believe that, hey, this is my night. I got my family, I got my friends here tonight, and this guy's trying to make a fool out of me. And you have to believe that. So that way you become that angry heel. And if you could do that, even if you're wearing a mask, then you're showing your anger through your body presence. And that means so much, right? Because if we're selling a move, pretending that it's hurt, right? We can't just say, ow, my back, right? You can say that, but you want to show it. You're holding your back, and then you're showing the facial expressions. And then now it starts, what the audience starts doing is they start relating to that. Oh man, maybe one day I slept and my back hurt, and I woke up and I couldn't bend over, and it hurt so bad. And you see the wrestler doing that. And I always try to tell these wrestlers you have to relate to the pain that you've actually felt in your real life. So if you slept in your neck and you hurt it, and someone gave you a neck breaker, can you turn your neck? No, you're probably doing this. And if you actually start thinking about that and really deep diving all the way into it and believing it, that's where the performance starts becoming magic. You start putting it together organically.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Joey? What's something you've taken away that would be universal for anyone, that would be compelling for writing stories or even just being a storyteller, because that's what everyone is?
Well, one thing would be when people get into wrestling, everybody's got their own idea of what they want to do, right? Just like Tim says, you got to see what works actually, as opposed to what you actually want to do. You can use your vehicle, which our vehicle is going to be professional wrestling. But you have to connect with that crowd. And that's number one, really. I don't care what level it's on, whether it's national level or the independent level that we're on. If you're not connecting with that crowd, it's going to be hard up to really try to get that booking. Because from the wrestling school, we moved into promoting shows. And, so what I do is I like to actually go into the crowd, and just like Hunter says, is watch the crowd, because those are my customers, and see what they like, what makes them go, wow, what makes them actually pick up their phone and just look at their phone. You start studying that, and you start studying your wrestlers. Who's wearing, one of our most famous, popular wrestlers is Delilah Doom. And she wrestles all the guys, she wrestles all the girls, and she goes out there and she just gets the crowd up onto their feet. And you got little girls, dressing up like Delilah Doom. And I tell her, that is a huge deal. I get it. Everybody wants to make it to that next national level, but you got little kids coming in on independent level on a Saturday night in East LA dressing up like you, because you made that connection. And that's the most important part, right? And going back to, we're doing the moves for us, but we got to remember who we're working for, and that's the crowd. Just like they say, art's not just supposed to look nice, it's supposed to make you feel something. The same thing with professional wrestling, right? Everybody that comes into wrestling school, I tell them, hey, there's a wrestler out there that actually connected with you. That's why you're here, ready to, get your ass kicked in wrestling school. You know what I mean? So making that connection is so important. And a lot of these kids, they come in and, they love watching wrestling. But you have to really dig down deep and really find that fighting spirit and pull out that character and pull out that connection, because they're so shy. Going back there, that's why we put them in that mask, So if you can make that connection with that crowd, you can do anything. I tell them, hey, you can do really cool moves that are very difficult to do, and you're going to make a crowd cheer. But, even a seal can do that. So, but if you can connect with that crowd on a different level of your character, it really doesn't matter what you do. They're just going to be behind everything that you do, and they're going to love it, and they're going to buy your merch, and then so on and so forth. And that's how they try to get to that next level,
So connecting with the audience, of course, definitely.
One of the things I was thinking about was when Joey was talking, you were talking about still having personality, but under the mask. One of my favorite wrestlers in WCW was La Parka Original, was La Parka.
Yeah.
Here he is under a hood. You don't even see his body, like his whole body's under it. But he was one of the most charismatic guys. The chairman of WCW, his little dance, and he would use the chair on people, and he would use it as a guitar. And the guy's under a mask. I mean, he was fun, and he was way better than, somebody that you could see their whole body, but it still wasn't giving anything.
Yeah, because it makes you, right, if you're under that hood, you're under that mask and full body, covered, it definitely making you have to really now put on that show, put on that character. And yeah, the Parker would go out there just like someone saying, and he would do a little dance and kind of do a little, I think it was like a Toro go by, you know what I mean? And just really like, he would be that face, but he's dressed all in black as a skeleton, and everybody would love him. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that, like the Undertaker, right? Undertaker is this big, mean-looking character, but that's the legend that everybody loves. They grow to love, love these characters. I like to even say, like, sometimes in that Undertaker era that he became, right, the way he told his story was like an era where they had the plumber, right? They had the hockey player.
The era of job wrestling.
Yeah.
Everybody like losing, I mean like occupational wrestling.
Right. And so the Undertaker was part of that.
Yeah.
Right. And now everybody looks at that like that is the legendary character and say, look at, he took that, the job character, and was able to tell his story to that job character where most people would say, oh, I'm the plumber. And that's a rough one. I don't know if anyone could pull that one off, but, telling his story there. But Undertaker, I mean, is not much better. It's cool now because we look at it 35 years later and it's like great, cool, legendary character. But at the time, I'm the Undertaker. What? How am I going to get that over?
Stone Cold didn't start out as Stone Cold, he was, one of the Hollywood blondes. He was out Rainmaster. I mean, you have to be able to subvert expectations. If you stay the same character and you don't change, then you're failing at wrestling. You adjust, you grow, you mature, you change, and so you have to be open to that as well.
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be trial and error. You're going to think of this the greatest idea. When you're on that treadmill, you're in that ring, and you're going to think of the greatest idea that you could pull off. You go out there, and it goes over like a fart in church, and the crowd does not like it whatsoever. A lot of the times is if you get so great at your craft, where you're not thinking about the moves, you're not thinking about the bump or the suplexes, that's second nature. You actually start listening to that crowd. If you can listen to that crowd, you can figure out how you're going to tell your story. I like to say, like, a lot of the times, like, even the most electrifying move in wrestling was The Rock's elbow, which started as a joke of trying to actually make The Undertaker laugh.
Yeah, definitely a joke. It's an elbow, but the work.
But if you let it happen organically, the crowd really gets behind it, and it's a lot. Throw it to the wall and see what sticks. It's going to be a lot of it's going to fail. A lot of it's going to fall flat, but something's going to work, and that's not everything works. But it's a numbers game. It really is. I'm trying to, if you're like, whatever it is, if you're trying to make money telling your story, or if you're just trying to tell your story, just like, in my era, like in professional wrestling, it's a lot of trial and error. And I tell like the students, like, you can't give up. Because you got to remember, when the going gets tough, you got to remember, why did you start this? You started this because this is actually your dream. You want to do this, right? I see people, we're right there off the 710 freeway, and the 710 freeway is packed every Monday morning, and there's people driving to a job that they hate, probably working for a boss that hates them. And you have an opportunity, if you're coming here to this school, to actually get yourself out of that. And I've seen it happen. It used to be a pipe dream when we were working in the backyard. And then we had a wrestler named Brody King who got signed to a national company called AEW. And now they got action figures of this guy. And we trained him right there at East LA in an 800 square foot building. But it's because, it's just so much work. And then if you get that opportunity to tell your story, that's where it's going to really come into play.
Any last points you guys have?
I think that Tim brings that up, is I tell a lot of the wrestlers, it's, they definitely are, right? We're all chasing that next level. But I tell them also, like, you gotta remember to enjoy the journey, because then it just kind of flies right by you. And a lot of the cool stuff that happens is before you get to that level, especially in professional wrestling. Once you get to that national level, it's not it's not so much wrestling anymore. It's a television show, you know, and they're going to tell you exactly sometimes what to do unless you're The Rock or unless you're one of those most popular wrestlers. And coming in, you're probably not going to be. So I always tell them to enjoy the journey. Like, that's so important. And not even enjoying the journey, like, you're so worried about getting to that next level. What are you going to do when you get there? You know, I always tell them, cut your teeth on the independent level so that way when you get to that next level, you know exactly what to do. Because they're just like that. They're just like that bridesmaid always chasing that, you know, trying to be that bride. And they're always chasing, they're always disappointed. And I say, hey, when you do that, you're always going to be disappointed. So you have to. Like I always tell them, I was supposed to be the world champion. Now I'm the wrestling school guy. But you have to enjoy the journey, you know, because it gets tough sometimes if it doesn't work out the way it's supposed to.
Now, Joey, I only have two passions. It's hypnosis and professional wrestling. And I love professional wrestling from the front row seat of the indie show and from the couch, and that's about it. What made you decide professional wrestling was something to do? You had to show the world what you could do with it.
Well, it's kind of a funny story. It's my uncle was a wrestler, Supreme. He passed away in 2020, but that was his dream to be a professional wrestler. And he was the coolest uncle in the world, whether it was watching horror movies, going to the comic book store, or watching wrestling, or even going to wrestling. And so one day we went to a wrestling show, and I had no clue. It was at a Boys and Girls Club in La Puente, California. And all I knew was that Road Warrior Hawk was going to be there, and the UFC champion Dan Severn was going to be there. And I was like, I'm pretty geeked out. I'm 14 years old. I want to go. They went and they had a 5-minute match, and it was like, I didn't even know what good matches or bad matches were. I just knew I did not like that match. But the main event were these two unknown guys named Sabu and Al Snow, and they went in there and tore the house down. And there was obviously wrestlers there in the crowd. And my uncle he's only like 5'7". He's got tattoos all over his head, piercings all over his face. He looks like the wrestler. And so these guys see him, and they're like, hey, you want to come to wrestling training with us? And he's like, oh, hell yeah, I do, but, you know, can my 14-year-old nephew come? And they're like, if that's what it's going to take to get you to come to training, then yeah, he can come. And so really, at the end of the day, I fell into wrestling because of my uncle, and that was back in 1994, and I'm coming up on 30 years this year. And I couldn't imagine doing anything else in my life. And I got my uncle to really thank for that. And I do it for him every time I go out there and everything. It's been tough for the last 4 years since he passed away, but I do everything. I do it in his honor because that's why I'm actually in wrestling. It's because of him. This is his dream.
That's beautiful.
He's ready, brother. He's looking down on you right now.
Thank you.
Where can they find you, Joey?
Yeah, you can check us out, Santino Bros. We have a heavy social media following on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And I'm behind all of those. I do all the social media for it's a lot of work. It's another job. But yes, if you message the Santino Brothers site, website, or the social media, that goes directly to me.